What are you trying to hide from me?
So how'd you mess up your arm, huh, Jet?
What does that have to do with it?
Nothing at all.
So when are you gonna answer my question?
When you answer mine.
So last week I got an interesting request for a review. Someone wrote in asking me to review more episodes of Cowboy Bebop, having seen the first impressions review. Well, I'm happy to oblige. In the interest of the people who hated the pointing out of off moments and bad gags, I'm keeping this as serious as possible, though I can't help but make the snarky remark here or there. So this is going to be a serious, opinionated review of a Cowboy Bebop episode. Take it for what you will. It's just my opinion and nothing more. I'll be doing 3 of these videos, but the request was specifically for Ballad of Fallen Angels, and in my opinion, it's a great place to start. Everything that is absolutely awesome about Cowboy Bebop in 22 minutes. For everyone that thought I was harsh on Asteroid Blues, it's because in comparison to the rest of the series, it really is a crappy episode. So let's get started. So our teaser opens with a couple of mobsters deciding, let's make a deal. With a blood thumbprint. And the kind of deal they're making is a pact in order to join forces so everybody gets a piece of the action without, everyone around them dying. And of course, this is followed up with pretty much everybody dying. We're here introduced into Vicious, pretty much our antagonist for the remainder of the episode, who is a bloodthirsty nutball. The mob boss remarks, though, that if Spike were here, he wouldn't have done this. And of course, since we only know one Spike, it's got to be our Spike. Again, the teaser really does a great job to illustrate the fact that Vicious is insane and that he's willing to kill anyone who gets in his way, even massive crime bosses. So our episode proper opens with Bebop docked outside a port while Spike and Jet argue over their latest bounty hunt. And they have a cryptic conversation about how the bounty head is linked to Spike's past, but of course Spike isn't talking, and points out that Jeff isn't too forthcoming with his life story either. And in walks Faye with a whole bunch of packages, and since she was introduced 2 episodes ago and I only mentioned her in a throwaway line that no one got in first impressions, now might be a good time to discuss her. Faye is a con artist with a clouded past, not too unlike Spike and Jet, but brings some real femme fatale to the series, and of course fan service. The only other problem with her is she's really annoying, and half of her character revolves around the fact she hardly wears any clothes. You know, for a series where everyone wears fairly reasonable clothes for the most part, Faye is trotted out there as a typical anime character that all the girls should cosplay, and they put all her prominent features on display. And by that I obviously mean her boobs and her ass. Thankfully, this is Cowboy Bebop and not Gurren Lagann, so Faye is actually a well-developed three-dimensional character. And a good portion of the story is actually set aside to explain her backstory. Anyway, for now, she's just curious about the conversation the guys are having, and Jet basically tells her to kiss his ass. Again, there is a good reason for that. She can't be trusted. She betrays Spike and Jet kind of on a whim, several times. It's actually multiple times an episode, depending on which one you watch. Anyway, Spike heads off on his own, as usual, and says nothing, which pisses off Jet. You think he'd be used to that by now. And he storms off. And then a message comes in, but Faye answers it instead of Jet, because why not? So Faye flies in on her ship and figures since this is a high-class concert, she should probably put on some friggin' clothes. She gets stopped at the door and is asked for her ticket, but again, she's a con artist, so she basically passes herself off as an escort for the crime boss. And this is one of those short scenes that proves my good points about Faye. She's a street-smart con artist who gets her way and can handle herself, despite passing herself off as a whore, which is morally suspect. You see my point, though. She can get where she needs to go through con artist skills. That's the point. Meanwhile, Jet broods about Spike and Faye going off and thrusting themselves headfirst into danger, while he decrypts some kind of database to get more information on the case. Back at the concert, Faye wanders around and finds Mal's box, only to be forced in at gunpoint. And that's cut short so Spike can stop some shoplifting kids stealing porno mags. Well, I guess they don't have the internet in the future, which is for porn and nothing else. But the shopkeep is a friend of Spike's who's surprised to see him alive, believing him to have been dead for 3 years, and asks her for more information about Mao. Back at the concert, Faye realizes that she's been hunting a corpse and that the syndicate has had her figured out from the start. What I do find interesting is that despite the audience knowing that Mao was killed by Vicious from the start of the episode, but we still follow Spike, Faye, and Jet getting to that conclusion on their own and individually. Spike by hitting up his old contacts, Faye by hitting up an obvious trap lead, and Jet by digging in the background, each playing to their suited roles to arrive at the same conclusion, and still engaging despite the audience knowing the inevitable conclusion, but are still wondering why. Basically, Shopkeep tells Spike to stay away from Vicious, and because this is Spike, he heads back to Bebop to get all his guns together and take out Vicious. Spike asks about Faye, and Jet fills him in that she took off like he did after the bounty. Jet fills Spike in about what we all know, and then Spike reveals that he wants revenge for Mao. Jet then mentions that he lost his arm because he was too gung-ho and didn't think things through, and he's afraid that the same will happen to Spike. Then Faye contacts them, letting them know she's been caught like a dumbass, and then Jet scolds her for being a dumbass. Wow, she can't catch a break, can she? But before Jet can just hang up on the idiot, Spike stops him, realizing that the people holding her must be related to Vicious. And because why not, Vicious is holding Faye in a church of all places. You gotta love that Japanese fascination with all things Western. What really punctuates the scene and even gives most of the episode its tone is the fact that the music has gone from the jazzy beat we're used to organs, which punctuates the total seriousness of the plot, along with the attitude of the characters. Vicious, who is, well, for lack of a better term, vicious, and will kill anyone in his way without regret or remorse, and Spike has had to change from his carefree attitude in order to deal with the seriousness of the threat. The other comparison to make in this scene is the fact that it's a throwback to all these John Woo movies, from the setting to the inevitable throwdown with Vicious, and it's just that, a clever, subtle nod that the series uses as an asset rather than a crutch. So Spike and Vicious shoot the breeze while his goon holds Faye at gunpoint. And holy crap! Spike just shot the guy. Wow, way to break from the norm. Usually there's a standoff and someone puts their gun down. Spike just blew the guy's head off. Nice. Anyway, the rest of Vicious's goons open fire on him while Spike systematically takes them all out. Faye escapes and tries to get Jet to back them up. Of course, Jet hangs up on her, but has second thoughts in the end. And now Spike and Vicious are face to face and face off, and after some sword-on gunplay, Vicious just throws Spike out a window, but not before Spike leaves a grenade to remember him by. The one flaw I have in this episode is that the fight between Spike and Vicious is rather short, especially with all of this build-up and the motivations for Spike wanting to get at Vicious. Again, Vicious is a man who's going after revenge himself. He killed Mao in order to draw Spike out, and it worked, and Spike wanted revenge for Mao. But neither man gets their just desserts. Of course, if that happened, this would be a very short series. So the build-up has to be even more build-up, which is fine, but I still think the flaw is a little less action than you wanted in this episode. After we see Spike falling out a window for a while, we get a mass flashback of Spike's past. And even without context or reason gives us a clear bridge of the man Spike was, a syndicate mastermind, to the man Spike is, a carefree cowboy. He then awakens on the Bebop after having slept for 3 days, and now has enough energy to tell Faye her singing is completely off-key, a sign we're getting back to the status quo for Bebop. And if you're interested in more of Vicious, well, you'll just have to wait for Jupiter Jazz Part 1. Post-episode follow-up. What sets this episode apart from the rest, much like other episodes that deal with Spike's past, is the overall tone and seriousness of the danger and who they're up against. They're not dealing with a small-time drug smuggler or chasing down a dog. Vicious is serious business, and the tone has to take the appropriate change for this. And what's wonderful about this episode, that despite it ultimately dealing with Spike's past, everyone gets to take a major role in the story, and gets about equal amounts of time to reach the conclusion the whole way. And they're given dimensions and backstories to their characters that the earlier episodes just don't deliver the goods on, but this one does. For a story like this, Ballad of Fallen Angels deserves nothing less than a final score of 10 out of 10. Now, a note on the final scores in the Shaft anime episode guide. Scores are relative to the series they're in, so a 10 for Cowboy Bebop is not the same as a 10 in another anime series. The scores only measure up to other Cowboy Bebop episodes.